Hi, everybody. Welcome to Create a World. This is a very ad lib moment. The beauty of being able to have people sit with me and me being able to engage with them. And I'm going to really say engage with their psyche, the mind of their soul. Jacquelyn is an instant, wanted to grab and run with her. And so basically I did. And I went and looked at her website, which we'll be putting up after the Create a World. But there's, in fact, Jacquelyn, one of the most interesting things is, I'm going to just start this with this. So Create a World came to me a little over a year ago. And it comes to me, things come to me in templates. They don't come to me in to-dos. Like I get a kind of a template and then time unfolds it. So there was this letter that the young woman, Roxanne, wrote for us that I never saw. I never saw to this year, but it completely describes what I've been experiencing in Create a World. So it really was kind of eerie in that sense. But one of the reasons that Create a World was created was because there's some of us that are just in conversations that you can't easily package. You can't easily formulate them, and you can't really bridge them into the nomenclature of how people perceive at this time. And because there's this whole other, we're in a very fast renaissance, and there's this whole other, I don't want to say mindset, because when we think mindsets, we think fixed thinking. It's more like a relationship between our mind and creation that's evolving. And that's what happened in the old Renaissance. If you really look, the other Renaissance that we know the most about, it was new consciousness. It was new awareness. And it developed our world, the world we're in now, both the flaws of it and the values of it. So that's really where Create a World came from, is by Jacquelyn and I gabbing, and your all's job is you're like kids. You snuck up, you saw the open window, you see us drinking tea, thank goodness only tea, and you're eavesdropping. That's how you want to be in this conversation. And we're just gonna gab and be with each other and see what shows up. That's what Create a World has always been from the ancient times. People got together, they saw what showed up. That's it. So Jacquelyn, I would love you to introduce yourself. I personally don't like to frame people. I like them to frame themselves. So go ahead.
Hi everyone. I'm Jacquelyn. I'm just always aware of energy, and lately, the last 10 years, the last 15 years, time goes by so fast. It's been mostly with me doing body work and hands-on work with babies and kids and adults. I grew up in New York, but I've lived in Oregon for 18 years. So I do have both the coast energy, which is also a very interesting dynamic, the East Coast and West Coast cultural differences. Yes. No one really believes it, but it's true.
Oh, no, I do.
It is. It's a totally different culture.
Yep.
And so
we are not one country. There is no way we're one country. We just all speak the same English.
Yeah, and it's fascinating. It really is. So, and then that goes into the other dimensions and the cultures of the other dimensions, and which I think is just another example of how I'm aware of multiple realities, multiple worlds.
I want to address something about that. You know, I can't get over, yesterday was a hideous day. Something was wobbling in the whole universe, I think, yesterday. And I got hooked in that. But this whole, let me see if I can put this in words, because it relates to you, actually. If I can just relay it. So my hope for those of you listening, every human being is a field unto itself. We say a world unto ourselves, but then we think circumstances or culture. But what Jacquelyn just spoke about dimensional realities, we are as a field, we are designed to be a dimensional being. That's just the way we are. So that I think that will start the first of this conversation.
Okay.
With this piece. The second is that in a coherent field, moving towards cohesion, which we're not getting in today, things begin to become relevant. They also become reverent. I said those two words by accident this morning, but we have relevant that's like logical, but there's another relevant that's just plain reverent and beautiful. And you're not alone in the universe, that the universe and you are coherent with one another. And sometimes they're collectives of people that they collectively become coherent with the universe and themselves and others. So that's the frame. But I do this body work called I Magi, and I dug in. I did 11 months of it to get the framework. Now I'm digging in. I'm not going to talk about what it is, except for the relevance and reverence. So then at the same time, sliding into time, as Jacquelyn and I coming together to do this engagement with each other on Create a World. And then one of the people that transcribes for the field of Tantra Mat, she sent me this amazing article on this Clara, a medium that actually was in German, who actually coached de Gaulle so he could win his battles.
Huh.
And then she just found a book about her that somebody wrote, because as soon as she was basically, what do you call it? Decredited. She was basically, put in the background, but her predictions were incredibly right on. But so the point is that there's this interesting flux, I say, that Jacquelyn and myself and others are in, where we don't want to bring back the esoteric, because the esoteric actually separated itself from the everyday. I mean, everybody separated themselves. Everybody was busy separating themselves because we were caught in this dynamic of separation. Hence, you can't even introduce the mystical world, as you were beginning to say, or the dimensional world without triggers going off that are cultural triggers. They're not really real at all, but it's that same thing that happened to this beautiful woman. She had made such a difference. She helped de Gaulle win the war. And yet at the very end, she warned the French about the deep esoteric work that the Nazis were actually doing to win the war. Like they were using these methods and these dynamics. But so everything became terrifying. Then you have movies where anything about magic or anything about dimensionality or anything about multiple realities becomes a boogeyman's going to get you. And yet they were the richness of our entire world. That they're what keep me smiling. And they're what kept me from practically dying yesterday in a car, because a voice said, take this exit. And I did. And so
there was definitely like a lot of exit signs yesterday.
Yeah, and a lot about, we're definitely in a dying time. There's no doubt.
My blood pressure went through the roof. And I knew, and I've been called the canary a lot in my life. Have you also?
No, I'm more like the other end of the spectrum. I'm the one.
So like I feel like those waves coming, and it usually means I have to get horizontal, which is really interesting to me because like that's the time shifting, right? So like I'm having to get used to living in multiple, what's the word I'm looking for?
Temporal states.
Yeah.
Multiple temporal states. That's so fascinating to me. It's one of the reasons, I thought today, and it's true, that today was very timely for us to be in this conversation.
Yes.
And yesterday I was having trouble. I thought that's so strange. You get out of the car and I can barely, like I'm dizzy, like I need to lay down.
Yeah.
And yet there was no
like 3 days.
Yeah. So, but these are anomalies that there is a consciousness behind them. They're not random.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it does feel like I'm aware of two timelines merging, and it feels like we are getting to that point now where it's like we're getting to the bottleneck, and there is less oxygen and there is less space, so our bodies start to freak out.
That's fascinating. Just say anything else that comes to mind about that.
um and there's a lot of fear that comes up. I feel like the diaphragm also gets like tight. It's almost like we have to elongate, and our bodies are I really believe our bodies are changing. And I know you've talked about that, about like having high blood pressure, high cholesterol, like randomly, and it's more of a sign of this, what I'm talking about, than just our actual physical body having something wrong with it. And so I feel it like the tsunami sirens going off, right? Something's coming, and we have to be like, remember to float and not like hold on. And I think that really freaks our bodies out. But there is this physiological experience that I've experienced my whole life. I've always had some sort of like migraines, or I also had chronic Lyme disease for a long time. So there's lots of stuff that my body processes, I think, as part of that canary energy, that I'm doing it first to help, or not first, I don't like that, but like I'm doing that as a processing in my body, and then integrating to bring it into the, what'd you call it, the everyday world, the regular world.
Yeah, the horizontal.
Yeah.
I always found it fascinating, this thing about Lyme's disease. Like there are things I observe. Like, isn't it interesting how many people got Lyme's disease, including me, and got Lyme's, and then I go, and then I think, and then I've been listening to this book, Sand Talk by Yoko Porta, who's Indigenous Australian, and he's just now talking about how everything's just trying to be in relationship, and how what white people are called by the Australian Indigenous people, how they wouldn't think that getting a disease would be a disease. They would think it would be about something coming into relationship with you.
Yes.
And it's interesting that it's an insect and a parasite and a COVID and a virus and
bacteria.
and what if we are, and bacteria, what if we are actually in a homeostasis, and our job is just to build the body's capacity to transmute with it, which clearly mine has.
Yes, I agree. And I do feel like that's a big part of my work, is helping people's bodies be able to deal with that without totally freaking out and breaking down.
Yeah, because doesn't the freaking out generate most? Can you talk about see, I'm not in that world. Can you talk about the relationship between fear and freaking out, and how it affects the body when it's trying to transmute?
Yeah, because I feel like it makes it into a more dense, like we're trying to be less dense, right? So, or something's trying to help us be less dense. And so when we're freaking out, we're just shutting everything down. It's like a little kid not wanting to go anywhere, right? And just like putting your heels in the ground, and your parents trying to drag you, right? That's creating so much more tension and drama and pain, right? Instead of just taking a moment and being present and catching up with yourself. I think that it's a lot to do with slowing down also. That's another huge message I'm getting. Like, it's like, I really can't plan anything ahead. Even like one step.
Right. And that is freaking people out.
Yeah.
That is unnerving people. I mean, the Timeless Time before the one we did last weekend was about slowed down time.
Yeah.
Because the by and respond, and let me say what you see about this, because I don't have any of the medium you have, except I hear biorhythms, but I only hear biorhythms in relationship to the earth and the cosmos. I don't hear them in relationship to the physical form at all in any way. it's sort of like looking at something and knowing that its biorhythm is off with the earth, or but the biorhythm is off with the cosmos, whatever it's formed by.
Wow.
And in slowed down time, that last one we did, which is on my website, there was such an interesting phenomenon of just getting the body, the cellular system, not even what I think people would think of as a body, which is a mass, just to listen to the slowed down rhythm of a new biofield, And it was literally, Jacquelyn, because of what you're talking about, because I didn't want him to freak out,
Yeah.
because freaking out was not going to be good.
And that's why I love cranial sacral therapy, because I'm able to help people get into that state, so that they're not freaking out, where they feel their resource and their resilience and the support and the layers of support that are around them. That's something else I really, in the pre and perinatal psychology world, we talk a lot about the layers of support and really being conscious of them, how the earth support us, how you and I are supporting each other right now, and really being conscious of those. And I feel that that really helps people not to freak out, or help bodies not to freak out.
See, this is part of that synchronicity, because I was listening to Yunka Porta yesterday, and he says, now touch the little finger, that's the baby. Touch the next finger, that's the mother. Touch the third. And so he did just what you say. He made, and then he had to go like this. See, now that's what you would call a layer support, the mother, the child. And this is the father and the community. But you can feel it. What you were talking about fits with that completely. And
then the other thing about the layer of support is that the people who are supporting you are also supported, right? So like, if we're leaning on someone, we're not worried about that person taking on all of that.
Yeah, I don't think you were in the thread yesterday, but the night before, I always know when I'm in danger. I know that I don't know what you call it in cranial sacral, but what the thing of support you just said, I live in that relationship. Like, that's clear to me. It's why I designed everything the way I did. But I could feel like the sheep that got isolated from the flock the night before last. I could feel it. And I'm very curious about that. I'm curious about it because I don't have a cause. I'd accept for what you said, which it feels like we're scaling. And when we did timeless time, we resequenced time itself, time itself.
Yeah, that was a really important piece for me. I wanted to thank you for that too. I haven't talked to you about that. After doing timeless time with you, I felt such a more sense of clarity. Like, usually when I'm interacting with the other realms, it's very floaty and watery. And after doing that with you guys, it feels so much more solid and clear.
And what would you, I don't even know how to ask the question. Like, just say what comes to mind, because I don't know. But it's so weird to me, because what you were just talking about support, it also seems that, I'm gonna give it a stab.
Go for it.
Okay, I'm going to, because this conversation really mattered today. And I didn't know what we were going to talk about. I just knew it was going to matter. The one I had with Janice the other day was the same thing. So let's use the model of what you just said. Okay, like when you have somebody, a cranial person on the table. So I could feel that lack of support. And we only think of it as people not being there for you. It wasn't that at all. It was really like the sheep isolated from the flock.
Yeah.
So can you relate to that in any way through your own medium?
Yeah. So that's what I kind of feel like sometimes, like when the space opens up, right? So maybe when something, if something has been static and like freaked out for a while, and then it opens up, there's a lot of space. And then people kind of get freaked out when there's lots of space. So you saying the sheep is away from the flock, that just means there's a lot of space around them.
And it also, that speaks to it too, because one of the things I'm nurturing right now is people's ability to consciously pay attention to scaling.
Yes.
Whatever you said about having more space. And it does seem like the muscular and skeletal, as well as the nervous system, have adapted in a way that spatial phenomenon can either be, the part I'm interested in, the freaked out, I actually feel pretty good about, because someone comes to you, but at least it's like, the brake got stuck or the steering wheel got stuck, but at least the body responded. My
Yeah.
concern is when the person's body doesn't respond.
When it's still
And-
stuck,
Well, it's,
or
yes,
when it's in open space,
I
or
would say-
in between those two.
yeah, but I don't know. That's, if we analyze this.
The vision that
Zarella-
I get is like, if people who are like afraid of heights, if they're up on a tall building, they'd want to
Right.
go flat, right?
Yep.
That's kind of what I'm sensing into right now. I
I
feel
think
like I'm
that-
just
I
wanting to
think
be
that-
horizontal and flat so you're not going to fall.
I think that's really real because it isn't just a sheep separated from the flock, it's a sheep alone in the universe because there's been an up level of the
Yeah.
entire field.
Yes.
And then that thing you said about I look down and everybody else is still horizontal. Like, stand up, please. That is the
It's okay. We can stand up, everybody.
That is a medical. And then you get so caught because I'm not really talking about people. I'm talking about the condition that
Yeah,
I'm experiencing,
Well, that's the mindset, right? It's like some sort of like fear-based safety survival instinct. And for years I've been saying like we really need, and I think it's happening now, the evolution of our survival instincts.
Wow. You know me, I'm like the addict. When you give me good language, I'm like ready to lick you. Evolution of the survival system.
Yeah, because
Wow.
that's really what we're bumping up against.
That clearly, like,
Yeah.
where was I?
And because we have to, there has to be a death, right? If we're going through that portal of whatever's happening with timelines, it's going to feel like a death. It's a birth, actually. It's like going through the birth canal.
Yeah. And what the part that makes it not so jerky for me, like literally like shifting the clutch in the car, is that
I like that.
I actually, with everything I do, did not think of it as an evolution. And yet I can think in homeostasis easily.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? I couldn't, but the minute you said it, then there's something to trust because when the body knows it's safe, it will work it out. I
And
just
that brings me back to the work. Sorry,
Go ahead. You go first.
The work they do with the embryo, that the embryo is like the pure essence of anything that we want to become. And so I feel like as we go closer to that birth death thing, we have to kind of connect back with the embryo, which is the essence of our creation.
And can you respond to that or anything you can say about that? Because when I was writing language creation and I discovered the enteric nervous system, and I discovered that in Ayurveda, they consider the enteric nervous system the seat of the soul, and that it melts into the intestines from an embryonic point. I thought, oh my God, that has got to be where the original memory was. That has to be where the original memory was. Just anything you have about that.
Yeah. So some of what I've been studying the last couple of years is the idea of well, this goes back to the idea of like the sperm penetrating the egg, and that's like how things are created, right? And how that has controlled our whole culture and our whole language and how we see ourselves and how we see the world. And so if we can start shifting that, going back to what you were just talking about, whatever that essence of creation is, it's a coming together and like a co-creation of the sperm and the egg and spirit and matter, however we want to see it. And if we can get into that space, I feel like it seems less scary or freak out. So if we can go back into that essence of the embryo and that creative state, and see it as a co-creation, and also see it as a movement of spirit to, I don't know, I'm losing it now. I'm trying to be connected here and there at the same time.
Actually, it's beautiful to watch you. You're never not at work.
No, never.
Yeah, very clear. Honestly, take your time because I can tell you're at work.
So I'm just feeling into the embryo right now, and the embryo of the world. There's this man called Jaap van der Wal. He's from Netherlands, and he talks about how he's the one that talks about how we have the whole wrong idea about how we evolve and how the egg and conception happens. And he says it's all just our spirit really wanting to move, and we create ourselves through movement. And so that kind of goes back to the freak out, right? If we're this, we can't create anything. And everything that we can be is in that essence of the embryo.
It's also, I know when I can feel state shifts, I send out a message to the community: walk slow, check your feet, because the body's shifting its rhythmic patterns, which fits with what you said. And I never have the link. I really probably am a survival machine for human beings, because all I want is the human species to survive as its original design. So I often can't go off and see the fuller spectrum. I'm like the one that's warning people because the bear is in the woods, I mean, please walk that way. I mean, that's heavily my indoctrination of my consciousness. But what you just said is fascinating to me, because it never occurred to me when I tell people to slow down and watch their feet, and because it's really present in the field. People will run into counters, they'll walk into the side of the door, they'll in some cases fall down in pavement, and because I can feel it. I can feel when whatever you were just talking about, we don't have words for it, I can feel when that harmonic is shifting, that some kind of new balance point is happening, and we've been rigid and moving forward in linear time, and it's like walking into a wall. Or falling
I do that a lot of, like, I walk into doorways or hit my shoulder. I'm like, wait, then I'm like, okay, something's happening.
I'm always saying to people, don't worry, today I'm just dimensionally challenged.
I like that. I'm gonna use that one. That happens to me all the time.
Well, me too. Oh, there was
yesterday. Oh yeah. So I just feel like I want to say more about going, like, we have to kind of pull ourselves back. So, like, thinking about the evolution of the survival instinct, it's not moving this way, it's actually moving this way back into that essence of the embryo and the creative desire.
Wow.
So it's like we're coming back into ourselves. Like we went a little bit too far out that way.
And it's a little bit like a child, you go too far and then you fall, the baby falls over, then it gets up, tries, and until finally it gets its balance point.
Yeah, so that goes to what we were talking about, everybody wanting to do that, right? We went too far. We have to hug the earth for a little while. And then that will help our bodies calm down. I do a lot of work on the big exercise ball, just like rolling on my belly, and having clients do that too. That's really great for emotional integration, emotional support. Another layer of support for our organs on the front of our body that doesn't get a lot of that as much. Wow. Our back gets a lot of support, right? When we're sitting down or sleeping, but really putting that pressure. Now, as we're talking about that, I could see us hugging the world, and maybe being horizontal isn't always a bad thing like that, but then we have to, once we've had enough, then we can stand up. And I think that is a big message too, that we really need to take care of ourselves. So that's another feeling of the energy of like coming back into ourselves and stop taking care of everybody else.
One of the in his body of work I'm doing, they define openness is that moment that you put your arms out right before you hug something. And so that body description you just gave is the way for the system. I would relate that to, it's the way for the system to stay open.
Yeah.
Whether you're rolling on a ball or whether you're just, feeling that feeling of just stepping back a little bit and not embracing the world, just being open to the hug, I guess.
Yeah, I like that. That's good. Open to the hug.
And I do think there is something to that. again, in this work I'm doing, I think all the different kinds of work are coming together now, because everything, I think that the whole idea of the body is an expression of creation. It's not so much that people like yourself haven't been saying it ad nauseum. It's more that now the body, the human being's body needs the human being to hear.
Yes.
I think it does.
Yes.
I feel like I'm getting a treatment.
Yes.
No, and I'm actually not being funny.
I know,
but because
hard
it's
for me to be around people and not like people get pretty triggered around me if they have something really up for them.
yeah. Well,
then they get mad at me. They think I'm doing something to them.
Yeah, I love
I'm just
it.
being me.
But people used to say, somebody asked me once why I wasn't very social. And I said, people have a tendency to grow up on me.
Yeah.
They just have a tendency to. And, but that's the phenomenon of a field being a field. You know, like, and you've heard me say it. That's why people say, how'd you get this way? I said, I didn't get this way. I learned how to survive being this way. And you could say that easily.
Yeah.
You know, and it seems to be the phenomenon. I used one of my minister publican gave me an envelope one time. You'll love this. And it was not sealed, but you know how you used to tuck envelopes in? And he handed it to me, and it had my birth name on it. And he handed it to me and he said, don't ever worry about it. You're right in here.
Aww.
And for some reason that always reminds me of I'd like to hear from you on this. I do know myself as a field being a field, because I can tell what happens to people around me. And it doesn't feel I generated in any manner. It seems like it's the water they're swimming in. And then I always go back to that envelope, but I don't worry about it because I'm right in here. My eye is right there, you know.
Interesting. I've been thinking about this a little bit lately about like I was seeing it as an elephant, like the big, like really big animals or really big fields. What do they have to lean on?
Wow.
And what do they have to know themselves? And when you were talking about that, those of us who really are experiencing ourselves as a field, it's more difficult to find those things to lean on.
Yes, I concur.
And so lately I've been really seeing it as a elephant leaning on a tree.
Wow.
And so
wow. This goes back to what we're talking about, like, because I could equate what you just said to how I felt Wednesday night. I felt like the elephant that couldn't find the tree.
Yeah.
It's exactly how I felt. And wow, that's fascinating. And for people listening, one of the things that one of the reasons we want to do this is because we don't know any more than anybody else, but we find that when we begin to discuss something becomes often more apparent, but it often it becomes possible to at least get a direct experience of a great mystery that's before us and that we're in. And there is some relaxation of the body inside. The cellular system does relax when it does hear something that maybe we as our identity can't possibly hear.
Yeah. And that is coming up a lot as our brain, for me anyway, I see it as our brain can't understand anything that's happening, right?
Right. It's a survival machine, and the only thing happening to it is it knows it can't survive in the neural patterning it was in.
Yes. And that feels like that's part of the death thing, right? That feels like a death and a freak out. Yeah.
Can you, are you open to speak a little bit about what I'm just going to coin it, other realities?
Yeah. I see it as spheres, the other dimensions as spheres. And I came up with a new way to describe it the other day for those of you that seen like the Doctor Strange movies where they have the mirror world. It's kind of like that. Like I feel like I can create places like that, or I can find places like that, either one, where things can exist in their own space-time. And then how those spheres interact with each other and how, if they get, closer or further away, and how they move and create. And then within that, and then that starts going into the torus too, right? So that for me, the torus is like a bunch of those spheres around each other, and then moving, and then the space between is just what's created from that.
So
I'm just really aware of other things that are going on. I don't really know exactly how to explain it. I kind of explained it a little bit when I noticed the difference after the timeless time of that being much more clear and not floating as much. I feel like I fly or I'm in water a lot when I'm experiencing those other worlds. I do a lot of that work in my sleep also. Or that was not work, explorations, lots of journeys and rides. And I used to surf a lot when I was younger, so it always kind of feels like surfing to me.
Another craniosacral therapist actually just wrote me yesterday, or text me, so I'll ask you. And she said, because she basically said, because I've never not journeyed. I mean, I'm actually amazed when I get a full night's sleep. And
I don't think I ever do, really.
Yeah, because, and I want to be really frank about it, and I'm not talking about maybe the future or even now, but for me, it was the only time I felt safe.
Yeah.
And I think this, which was very interesting, because my mother was a violent alcoholic, and so at 3 a.m. I was not safe in the human world, but somehow in the dream state, even when I was in the experience of realities that were kind of treacherous or even unnerving, I had a sense of mobility. I had a sense of engagement that I felt handicapped with in the human world.
Yeah.
And that's what I hear you saying.
Yeah, because it's hard to be in all those multiple worlds, right?
Yeah.
And if no one else around you knows what's happening, like it was really hard for me to know what was real and what was not. Well, what's real, right? But from what my mother was telling me, and my grandmother, and my community, my family, that what I knew was not real.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that this person texted me about, she said, a lot of people are wondering how they can get a full night's sleep now. They seem to be doing a lot of dreaming.
My answer to that is get some craniosacral therapy.
Yeah, well, that's why they were there, to get craniosacral therapy. And I said,
that's when I get the most rest, is when I get a session. I had one yesterday that was really amazing.
See, that's so interesting, because I feel like the fundamental necessities of what human beings used to see. I do remember healing. I just don't remember the way it is now. In the worlds I came from, healing was a maintenance.
Yes.
It was an expression of love. It was a shared field of love. It had a coherency. It had a coherency. So whatever, like even using not that you did this, but even in the term craniosacral, what's behind it is contact.
Yeah.
Presence. Yeah, and presence. And it's a shared presence, and it's a shared contact, and it restores the basic rhythm of our togetherness. And I think this thing you said earlier about the evolution of our survival systems, I think there's something connected to that. Something like, I mean, I do short statements because of my pragmatic mind, but I jokingly say, which is not at all a joke, it's more sarcasm, that now we just can't afford to live without each other.
Yes.
But there's also a deeper, richer, more profound love affair in that, rather than my irritation.
Yes, it is a love affair. Like when I meet somebody in that cranial sacral space, and I don't actually think that the cranial sacral word is the right word, but it's just what we have right now. I'm meeting them.
Our mafia storefront.
Yes. I'm meeting them like exactly where they are right now, where their body is, where they are, right? So I'm observing them. And I think that's part of it too, is being seen and being heard in that space exactly where you are.
Yes.
And then that goes back to the coming back into that kind of embryo, coming back into ourselves space where and then, in the craniosacral world, we talk about people are able to get into that deep rest state and then their nervous system can reorganize.
I'm curious because now I have two of you. I'm fascinated by craniosacral, and because I work with the brain.
And Heather does it too, right?
Yeah, I work. It's the two of you I'm talking about.
Okay.
But and I'm fascinated with the brain, but from a totally different angle. I'm watching its evolutionary neural wiring. I'm not trying to affect it at all. I'm just trying to give it a place to expand.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, but
I want to give things place to expand.
Yeah, but I'm trying to use it through getting the mental thinking process to line up with that.
Okay.
I think that's really essential.
Yeah.
And that's why I push the creation templates. But going back to this, and this is not a question to be answered. It's just coming up for me in this conversation. And I do think I can language it. And that is, it's interesting to me. Oh God, I love being in this conversation with you because it challenges me. I really am a thinker and I really am an inquiry addict, I guess you would say. But the thing that interests me, especially knowing the two of you, who I have just so incredible admiration for, because your souls are in the game. You're not just in the method. Mm-hmm. And that's essential for any true healer. You just got to have your soul in the game. But there's something about, I think her question wasn't, here's what I think her question really was. Not that you knew, but I don't think it was how do they sleep? Because I know the craniosacral session takes care of that. It does for me. Mm-hmm. So here we go. Because you know me as the time being. I wonder if something's happening where by doing the craniosacral session, there's something about having it last longer in time, having it move longer in time. And then going back to something you said earlier about the survival, the evolution of the survival mechanism, then my next thought is there must be something about the calming of the sacral, and I'm just going to call it the sacral because I don't know my terms, calming of the sacral and the observation of the survival mechanism as an observer. There must be something going on right now. So I think it would have to do with like suggesting several sessions until I'm doing this not for method, but for trying to think something through so that, but so that what would it take in time, linear time, for the survival mechanism to actually evolve? Because every time you and Heather, because I don't look for the person that does the method. I look for the person that achieves a certain kind of result. Yeah. And it'd be interesting to see if there's some kind of new time coming. Like you take an aspirin and you'll be over your headache in an hour or 2 hours, which doesn't really work anymore either. But the point is that there's something happening in time, I think, in this conversation. I wish I'd known how to answer her better, because now I would say we need to look and see about that transition between knowing yourself as a dream, as like like that thing about folding back. There's no way that's not dreaming. There's no way that folding back is dreaming.
Yeah,
it is the dreamy.
Well, the REM, and that goes back to the REM sleep, the craniosacral, and that was just happening to me now. My eyes were flickering, and it's like that's the processing, and then the nervous system has to be able to be in that relaxed state to go in that another direction. That's fat.
Let me say something else, because I have a Fitbit, and I can only sleep 4 to 5 hours. I mean, I'm lucky if I get 6. If I sleep 8 hours, I only sleep 3 the next night. But I always get an hour of REM. Always get an hour of REM. It never changes, not That's even good. Once. But isn't that interesting? Because I just think there's something between what you said about the evolution of the survival mechanism, it beginning to relax back into itself more, because the baby obviously came here to survive.
Yes.
And the patterning of dreaming. And I think everybody should buy a Fitbit and watch their REM. Maybe it's not the amount of hours you sleep, it's how much REM you have. Because
Yeah.
I have literally 40 minutes to an hour of REM a night, and I could sleep one for 3 hours.
Wow. That's so interesting.
I
Something's
like,
definitely.
I know. I'm like, my little brain is going to be checked out
My
later.
whole body's like.
But it's so great to be on the leading edge of I really do think craniosacral is one of the leading edge pieces of work. I really
Yeah.
do. And I obviously I've always come back to being the leading edge of things, because I always come back when new worlds are being born. But there is something about time, like how much time does our survival, because we have method, do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
get 8 hours of sleep. I mean, I would be dead by now if I had to get 8 hours of sleep. I don't know what 8 hours of sleep would mean. Like I would probably be comatose if I did 8 hours of sleep. But at the very same time, I'm not talking about method. I'm talking about, I wonder what's new now. What if we are in the new time sequencing?
I think we are. I
do too.
think that's what's happening right now. It's the integration or the timelines coming together. And yeah. When I'm working with timelines versus time space fields, I always hear echoes. And so the echoes are getting less echoey.
Well said. I'm just getting more perky. I mean, I was told I was a multidimensional being when I was 16 years old. So I haven't been walking around confused as long as a lot of people are, because either I got it or I was going to go crazy.
Yeah.
I really didn't have any choice. And so I was otherworldly probably by the time I was 22, consciously, not just at the effect of it, but consciously. And so I just noticed I'm perkier, because it's more the natural system it is the natural system of a human being. It isn't the unnatural system, it's a natural system. And those worlds are, like, I knew when we completed the spirals of being, we reestablished a broken matrix. I didn't know what. It doesn't matter. You just go in there and rebuild them. Like you said, you either go in there and build the time territories, or you find them.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we're dreaming. I think the type of dreaming that people are having now is, without them realizing, they're building time territories. And
That's so exciting.
And is it accurate in your terminology that because I haven't thought it this way, because I'm very clear about time territories, because so much lives outside of time that can't get into our time. Yeah. So that's all. And that's what a psychic is. All a psychic does is read the time territory of a human being to bring it back into this time. That's all that happens. It's not predicting a solid future at all. But the thing that interests me about this time space thing, that you said, because if without realizing it, we're in our dream states, we're restoring our time territories, our dimensional territories that live in time, because we're in this time dreaming, and it restores itself in this time. And then what would this time space, is that more like the journeying part between the realities?
Yeah. I for a long time I've really connected with the archetype of being the ferryman.
Oh yeah.
And so I bring people across waters, right? Or help people like navigate that. Or for now, like for a long time it's been navigating timelines and helping the timelines. And also when you were talking about being confused, like confusion is like a normal state for me, right? Or being dizzy, or like I just have to live that way. And so it's going back to the vertical and horizontal thing. It's like our world is changing. We have to learn to, like, gravity is almost changing, right? We have to learn to live this way or this way or this way, and it's different than the way we've been living, and so it makes us dizzy.
I got to get you and Heather and Michael all in a conversation together. And I'm just going to sit back and listen. First of all, you have perceptions I don't have articulation for. I can definitely relate as you're talking. There's no doubt, but I don't have the articulation that the developmental it'd be great to get you all together because Michael started have a conversation with me because of this thing. So this morning I woke up, what you said about the embryo, I hadn't thought about it till now. Because that event I had with those space beings, and I just couldn't get over me when Heather got me back to the house. I was so teeny. I was so soft. I was so non-gravitational. I was like a little floaty, like Casper, the friendly ghost. I only softer and molded into the bed, And I'd be darned if I didn't wake up in that this morning. And I haven't had that physiological sense since that night. And then I wondered if it had something to do with the chaos of yesterday. And then see, that's why I knew this conversation was timely. And your conversation about as the two timelines
just merging,
merge and would you say they're what was the word you started to be when it's all knotted up? I know it. Just give me a minute. Like when you can't breathe, because it's become so.
Because we're up against something.
We're up against, and it's so tangled.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, if I reflect to yesterday and today, I could tell that I was in a juggernaut, that I was in that juggernaut.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I called it a bottleneck. Yeah.
Yeah, bottleneck. That I knew we'd get to the word for it. Yeah, I could tell I was in a bottleneck in hindsight, which most of our view is hindsight now anyway.
Yeah.
And then it seemed to pop loose. And then this morning, I'm like this little soft ungravity thing again, and then the fluidity of the last hour before this call was just without almost bodiless, only the body was participating. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so
I work a lot with babies and embryos. I think your baby wanted to show up.
Yeah. Or the embryonic original memory of itself.
Yes.
And would that be interesting if that's how coherent feels within which maybe sentient beings actually exist, is they exist through their relationship to their embryonic natures.
Wow, that's causing my REM thing again.
That's really fascinating to me.
Like whatever you just said, I'm not sure I'll have to listen to it again, but it's happening. Something's happening.
When I really appreciate our time together today because there's a medium, and I don't mean a medium like a psychic channel, that there's a medium of engagement that I desire. And I don't desire I absolutely desire for myself. There's no doubt. It's my favorite space. But we did, like I have activations and engagements, but truthfully, it's all one thing. You just concentrate on one or the other, but they're both present, like the yin and the yang, they're both present. And I used to say to people, and years ago, I mean, this is like 30 years ago or 40. And I would say, you probably won't understand a word I'm saying, but check how you are tomorrow. And the thing about being with you today is they may not have understood a word we said, but they should check with themselves tomorrow. And that really is the phenomenon of never not being like we've been in your time territory today.
Yeah. And we say that in cranial sacral therapy too. It's not really what happens on the table, it's what happens in the next days or weeks or
Right. And that's really that's the most important. It also goes back to people's perception of just get me up so I can get going again, rather than just get me up and I'll evolve over the next few days.
All right, I'll get you to rest enough where you can be up for that. Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm so grateful for you. This has been so fun.
It's really the part that's important is the streaming. not the YouTube streaming, but
But between us.
yeah, between us. The
Yeah.
important part is the streaming, because it really doesn't really matter, you know, if we're ever understood or known. It does matter that you and I and others embrace our uniqueness and discern that we're just plain don't operate the way most human beings operate when they came in.
The
That
first
is,
thing you ever said to me, I think on the first engagement, was like, you're not alone.
and
That-
now there's a distinct, like Heather even texting me that question was so significant, because these are everyday people leading everyday lives that have never coped with any dimensionality, never coped with any restoration of self, you know, that have really been just doing life the way they were shown that life was supposed to be done. And I just always go back to that movie. I don't know why I like that. I like the title more than the movie, probably, of Girl Interrupted. And I always say we've been species interrupted.
Yes.
And that it's really beautiful to see the species restoring itself again. And I'm calmer now, because I was very concerned about the personality structure being at the effect of it, that it would be deadly and counterproductive. But I don't feel that way as much anymore. And I don't know why. So I just want to turn it over to you for any last words or any thoughts, and I really want to get the three of you together. Let's see if I can
That'd
navigate
be
that.
I could talk about this all the time.
Well, the three of you, it's so interesting. Your not what would I say? How you come out at it is distinct, but there's a common resonance. And I've never had the chance to get three people in a common resonance. You're like me because I'm highly auditory, and I also was an opera singer. So I can hear common resonance, even through your voice and their voice. And
well, it's probably after doing, I don't know, I haven't watched the Creative Worlds with them yet, but I think it's just being in that field a lot. That's the field is common. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is like meditating all day when I'm working.
Yeah. That's beautiful. So any last words before we
the other main thing that I just always want to share with people is that, like, the realm of possibilities is what a lot of people say that I help them with, is just holding or just saying that space exists. So anything that we want or that we want to change is possible. Yeah. And I hold that, I see that, and I feel that for everyone.
Yeah, me too. And I want to add to that I think it's a really good time right now for human beings to get what is their design. Like, you are off balance and dizzy all the time because your natural world isn't Earth.
Yeah.
And I live, like, I am flabbergasted. Thank God C lives with me. She has all this memory of things we did together. Otherwise, I have zero memory. Zero.
Yeah, I have memory. Yeah, I don't remember things.
And people in the culture we're born into, they think that's a problem. But when you get your dimensionality, you realize you're paying attention to something that just maybe other people are not.
Yeah.
And so it's really about the realm of possibility to be who we actually are.
Yeah.
And what our temple of existence really is. And that
thanks for saying that.
Yeah. And that we can let go of misconceptions that actually because the only person has to be in touch with the beauty of who you and I and others are is ourselves.
Yeah.
So, and it's fabulous. I had the best morning ever. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Really a precious moment. So thrilling.
Thank you for helping me put the words and connecting and.
Well, me too.
Know that it's real. It's real.
Yeah, me too. Really, me. So as soon as this gets up, then I'll have Jacquelyn's information in the description. But that probably won't be until tomorrow because I'm at the end of my time in the motel and have to fly out the door. Hey, precious care, honey.
Bye.